The movie opens in the year 2688, with a prologue from a time traveler named Rufus. Two budding musicians known as the Great Ones will someday have their philosophies become the basis for all humanity, bringing about peace and uniting the world with their music. Until then, William S. Preston Esquire's rocking out in the garage before school with Ted Theodore Logan. The two make up the band the Wild Stallions, though neither have any skills and have a long way to go before they're saving anyone. That day in history, Mr. Ryan tests Bill on his knowledge of Napoleon Bonaparte, but the Great One only knows him as some short dead dude. Ted gets questioned on Joan of Arc, but he just assumes she must have been Noah's wife. When class finishes, Ryan informs them that should they fail their oral history report tomorrow, they'll flunk the whole class. They're tasked with describing how famous historical figures would view their present-day town of San Dimas. They're given a lift home by a girl only a couple years older than them named Missy, who insists that Bill call her mom since she's now married to his much older father. They pull up at Ted's house where he finds his father searching for his missing keys that he blames his son for. Police Captain Logan reminds Ted that should he fail in history, then it's off to military school in Alaska. If this happens, the two will fail to achieve their destiny, forever altering history. So Rufus is tasked by the planetary government to keep the band from splitting up. While studying at Bill's house, they discuss the guy from the American dollar bill with a head shaped like a mushroom, and the coincidence that he was also born on President's Day. Missy enters with some food for the boys, giving Bill his first history lesson with Oedipus. Having taken the same class only a few years earlier, she offers to help, but Bill's dad enters with one thing on his mind. He gives the boys some money to go out, then he and his new bride don't even bother to leave the room. Bill and Ted go to a convenience store and begin asking the public questions about Marco Polo, discovering it to not just be a water sport. In the future, Rufus's teleporter is given the appearance of a phone booth to fit in with the present day. He travels back in time, landing right in front of the Circle K and being greeted by the boys, who instantly ask if he knows when the Mongols ruled China. Rufus offers to let them use the booth and ask him themselves instead, when a second machine appears and a future version of the Great Ones step out. They assure their past selves that Rufus can be trusted, and prove their identity by predicting the number in their present day's heads. The future them leave to finish their history report, telling past them to say hi to the princesses, and for past Ted to remember to charge his watch. Assuming they wouldn't lie to themselves, the two accompany Rufus, who shows them how the booth operates. It travels through the circuits of history with what the future man calls basic modern technology, then spits them out in 1805 Austria, where Rufus steps out looking proud of himself for impressing the Great Ones. He's dropped them right in the middle of the French invasion led by the Emperor Napoleon. Before they can leave history untouched, Napoleon's launched by a cannonball into the wake of the booth and is dragged through time with them. Arriving back in present day but a few minutes later, Rufus explains that time will continue to progress normally for them while they travel, therefore they still only have until the following day to finish their report. He then departs, leaving them a teleporter and a circuitry of time directory to navigate their own adventure, when Napoleon collapses from a nearby tree and the boys have a moment of inspiration. They come up with a plan to abduct historical figures, and have them speak for themselves at the presentation instead of just speculating their opinions. They leave an unconscious Napoleon with Ted's younger brother Deacon, but are held up by Dad on their way out. He refuses to let his son go out due to losing the keys and failing classes at school, so Bill calls from the booth outside claiming to be Professor Van Halen and needing to speak with him urgently. When he finally leaves, the Great Ones begin their journey through history, beginning with New Mexico 1879. They walk straight through the Old West, giving all of the locals the regular howdy partners and entering the nearest saloon. When the bartender doesn't ask for any ID, they just assume he's one of a kind and try to remember the name of the place for later. Just then, Billy the Kid enters and requires of the patrons 2 men for a game of poker, which the Wild Stallions are happy to oblige despite having no clue how to play it. During the game, Billy's discovered to be cheating and an all-out brawl ensues, with wall-to-wall chaos and one woman throwing herself through a window for absolutely no reason. The Great Ones are both thrown across the bar and head first into the dressing room, as they're clearly rockers, not fighters. When they recover, they take out their attackers with the look behind you wedgie technique, an innovative move in those days. The 3 flee to the booth with the whole bar in pursuit, and with the options being either to go with the strangers or death, the Kid chooses ancient Greece. They plan on swiping the famous philosopher Socrates and find him in the middle of teaching one of his classes. Bill attempts to communicate with him, quoting the song that all we are is dust in the wind, which he mildly understands, and joyfully exits the school for an adventure. They decide to stop at 15th century England and begin asking around for anywhere of historical significance until being directed to a nearby castle. After leaving Billy to look after Socrates, the Great Ones get distracted from their mission by 2 600-year-old women, so with the intention of abducting them as well, they sneak inside wearing suits of armor. The two forego all stealth and begin having fun play-fighting in their suits, until Ted tumbles down the stairs into the kitchen and appears to be killed by a guard. Thinking his best friend's just been murdered, Bill describes the situation as bogus, then stupidly attempts to avenge him by fighting a trained swordsman. He's overpowered and almost killed himself, until Ted saves him after apparently falling out of the suit of armor on the way down the stairs. When the two finally locate the women, they turn out to be the king's daughters, with their father planning to marry them both off to older men. The princesses Joanna and Elizabeth are obviously happy to leave the archaic time period, and agree to go with their saviors to the school dance. As they try to escape, they run straight into the king, who orders Bill and Ted both be thrown in the Iron Maiden for attempting to abduct his daughters, but when seeing how happy that name makes them, he orders them executed instead. With the phone booth as evidence, the two are condemned as demons who fell from the sky. And as they're about to get beheaded, the executioners turn out to be Billy and Socrates performing a rescue attempt. They're forced to leave their dream girls behind as they escape the castle, but the booth takes damage to the antenna during the chase. Once they've reached a safe enough distance, the only location from the directory that the broken machine accepts is the future, so it's better than nothing. Avoiding a flail just in the nick of time, they're all taken to the year 2688 and meet the planet's future leader and Rufus's boss, who gives them a rock and roll salute, which they in turn reciprocate. The entire dystopian society revere the wild stallions as spiritual leaders and wait for them to say a few words of wisdom.
Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes!
Afterwards, the Great Ones must unfortunately return to history to finish their report, as we cut to Napoleon having his first experience of Neapolitan ice cream. He enjoys it so much that he crosses swords with one of Deacon's friends for final land rights to the bull. Afterwards, they go to the alley, where the emperor cheats at the scorekeeping and throws massive tantrums when he discovers that he sucks at bowling. So when he isn't looking, Deacon and his friends decide to abandon him as he's thrown out of the alley and onto the street. Now attempting to return to the current day to do their report, the time booth's still faulty and sends them crashing through time into Austria 1901. So for some extra credit, they swipe Sigmund Freud up off the street without even asking him. Then 1810 in Germany, Beethoven doesn't hear them coming as the two abduct him during the middle of one of his performances. In 1429 France, a 17-year-old Joan of Arc's at a church in Orleans, when the Great Ones appear and she goes with them, assuming they've been sent by God. The machine then sends them to Outer Mongolia 800 years ago, and they come across Genghis Khan, who they lure on board with the promise of processed sweets. And lastly, they travel to 1863 and abduct Abraham Lincoln straight from the White House. By now the booth's overloaded and begins spinning out of control, so they pull over at the nearest time and begin working on the broken antenna to get home. With a team effort, they combine enough bubblegum adhesives and tins of pudding to MacGyver the booth back together. Two cavemen begin approaching and get to witness the terrifying departure, as the group manage to at last make it back to the Circle K, but somehow it's the night before. Rufus is introducing himself to their past version and they go through the whole 69 test again. He tells them the mistake they made is that they need to dial one number higher to reach tomorrow, and that they only have 2 hours left since Ted forgot to charge his watch, and reminds his past self to again, though we know he won't. With Bill blaming the lack of space solely on Lincoln's height, the group race across time and come down right behind Missy in Bill's backyard. They begin introducing her to the crowd of famous figures, but when Bill asks Mom to give them a lift, she reminds him of his chores, so they all work together to accomplish them. Once finished, she takes them to the mall so that the historical figures can learn about San Dimas while the Great Ones seek out Napoleon. They find out that Deacon ditched him and naturally assume he would have gone to the local water park called Waterloo. They're correct in their assumption, as the Emperor has his first experience with a waterslide, which terrifies him, but he comes out the other end a much happier man. While Bill and Ted are collecting Napoleon, the historical figures split up and begin exploring different parts of the mall. Socrates and Billy have developed a friendship and attempt to talk to modern women together, but when Freud introduces himself as Siggy, he induces the ladies with a mild case of hysteria. Genghis finds a modern club and uses it to take over the sporting goods store with plastic protection and a skateboard. Beethoven begins a concert at the music store, attracting crowds to listen, while Joan hijacks an aerobics class and increases the speed tenfold. Abe gets accused of stealing his clothing from a costume shop, and they all begin to get chased around the building by security. Eventually, each one of them are arrested and taken down to the station, where Ted's dad leads a team of investigators to find out just what the hell is going on, and where one is driven away by Siggy, who begins asking questions of his own. Bill and Ted get a lift to the station and come up with a plan to break their historical friends out. They're able to use Ted's father's missing keys, which will be hidden by future Ted sometime in the past before we first saw Dad looking for them. They sneak into the station and begin to release all of their new friends, but are caught in the act by Dad. Present Ted plans for future Ted to travel into the past and sets a trap, capturing his father in the present, allowing the Great Ones to escape. At school, the stage goes dark and the historical figures are unveiled to the assembly. After Billy blows a light out above students to get their attention, and with an almost a concert-like quality to the proceedings, Socrates is presented to the students as the most bodacious philosophizer in ancient Greece and the father of modern thought, who was constantly accused of corrupting the minds of the young like Ozzy Osbourne. On stage, Siggy helps Ted discover that his father's resentment for him stems from his own fear of failure, while Bill doesn't need a diagnosis to know what his own problem is. They introduce the Khan as the man who ravaged China 700 years ago, and also the sporting goods store 2 hours ago. The 17-year-old Miss of Arc has already led a siege against the English and won, while Napoleon talks of his plans to defeat his enemies with waterslides, and chucks another tantrum when Ted expresses his doubts. The entire time Beethoven's playing music on electric keyboards in the background, and they conclude with a few words from the greatest speaker in history. Abe sums the whole thing up at the end with the line that everyone should be excellent to each other, and to party on, dudes! Receiving a standing ovation, blowing the roof off the place. With an obvious passing grade, the great ones depart with their historic friends and rip another hole into space and time. Sometime later they're rocking out as usual when Ted suggests that maybe they should learn how to play guitar. Just then Rufus enters as he's rescued the two princesses from their loveless marriages, as he says they're also part of the Wild Stallions in the future. He asks for all four signatures as his son's a massive fan just like everyone in the 27th century, and gives them 2 parting gifts. After asking if he could play with them, Rufus picks up a guitar and shows the kids how it's done. The great ones attempt the same but just emphasize their lack of any harmony.
They do get better.
And the movie ends.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
So you made it. I appreciate your time. I couldn't have done it without you. Tell your mother I said thanks.